demonstration of today's Immersify presentations. For this presentation, we will now focus on the Great Pyramid project. As you have seen previously, live streaming is a very important topic for immersive media, but for sure it's also important how to play back videos and rendered content. And this project is dealing with large-scale 360 videos, stereoscopic videos. And this is really very challenging for the system to play back something like that. And also it needs to be played back interactively, because we can actually control the playback, we can move the camera. So these are all things that you will see afterwards. For us, this was really challenging, because this brought our system here really to the edge. And this is actually something that we're looking in, actually starting with 2015, when we upgraded the deep space environment here. Before, we had 8 HD projectors, and now we are using 8 4K projectors, which means we have much higher resolution in projection, but which also means you need to have a much higher resolution in your content. And what we have seen so far, also in 2015, is that when you use basically just open source or free video codecs, then it's incredibly hard to play back videos at this resolution. So actually, in 2015, when we started testing, the resolution was like 6K, for example, for a normal 60 frames per second video. And for stereoscopic videos, which need to be playbacked at like double frame rate, the resolution was then even lower. So there we knew something needs to be done, and this was then also the reason why we started this whole collaboration in Immersify, also with Spin Digital, and they are working really on high performance video codecs. And this is what we are using here for this project. And in order to really make this interactively playback possible, the video playback is integrated into the Unity 3D game engine. So this is basically then another level of technical integration that we did for this project, so that you have really full control of an interactive environment which uses videos as basically one medium to show basically what's happening around you in an immersive environment. And for today's presentation, we will start with the introduction to the project itself, and this will be done by my colleague Melinda, and she will basically show us the highlights of the Great Pyramids, and also how you navigate through this project. And afterwards, my colleague Clemens will then explain technical backgrounds. So he will show you how this was made in Unity, also which components he had used for that, and some of them, which were especially developed for this project, had been released as open source in the Immersify project, and will also be available to you to develop content in a similar way. So, but without talking too much anymore, I just hand over to Melinda now and would ask you for an overview and presentation of the Great Pyramids.
Right then. Okay, guys, just give us a second to set up our camera that will show me while I explain. And you should be already able to see the Great Pyramid application loading. And what I will do now is show you the pyramid from the inside. So what we will actually, fly around the corner. Okay, so my camera is set up. So hello, everybody. I hope you can see me now. And now we can also see the Great Pyramid. And as you can see, I can, turn around, rotate the whole thing. And I'm doing this by using an Xbox controller, by the way, which makes it way easier and more, like natural for myself. And right here you see a smaller pyramid, also quite large. It's the pyramid of Khafra, by the way. Khafra was the son of Khufu. And the big star of this application is, of course, the Great Pyramid, Khufu's pyramid. And we will now start the first video. Okay, this is really cool. We will now fly around the the pyramid and fly over the so-called Western Cemetery, which is the last resting place of many high officials. Among them, by the way, Hemiunu, and Hemiunu was the vizier, second most important person in the realm, after the pharaoh, of course. And as he was vizier, and thus responsible for the building endeavors of Pharaoh Khufu, he was probably involved in building the Great Pyramid. But we will now do a quick stop right here, and we will take a look at the original entrance. And for us, it's nice and visible. It's quite clearly conspicuous. We have those two arrow shapes pointing upwards, those two chevrons. But originally, those were completely covered by limestone blocks. You know, limestone blocks, just as you see them all around the entrance. Plus, the whole pyramid was covered in, well, you could say, a facade of beautiful, white, glittering Tura limestone blocks. So the surface was completely smooth, and thus, of course, the entrance was completely hidden. But there's a second entrance, and that one is actually way less conspicuous, and it's quite difficult to point out. Yeah, it's easier, it's much easier if I start the video again, and then you will see where the second entrance is located and where it will lead to. By the way, directly connected to the main entrance, or the original entrance, we have the descending passage, which is a very, very long passage indeed, about 130 meters, that leads in the underground. Okay, so another quick stop. Okay, we just have to do a quick adjustment. Okay, then here you can already see a structure that is not quite as nicely geographic as straight and perfect as all the other structures or passages. And here you can see this other entrance. And we know from experience that the laser pointer that I'm using right here is not quite so nicely visible, but I will still try to point it out to you. Right here is the second entrance that's not quite as nicely visible, and that leads to the robber's tunnel. So this shape that I have now described, this shape that looks so different from all of the other shapes, is the so-called robber's tunnel. And most visitors of the pyramid, of the Great Pyramid, actually use this entrance because the great attractions, the two biggest attractions, are now nice and visible in front of you. It's the Queen's Chamber and the King's Chamber. So this is the Queen's Chamber and this is the King's Chamber, right? And those are only accessible by the robber's tunnel. I will actually explain in a second why. And you see, it's near the original entrance. However, it is definitely not exactly the same layer of stones, as you can see. And we do not know for sure who actually built or made the robber's tunnel, but the most common theory is that a caliph in the 9th century called Al-Mamun was actually the one who commissioned it, because he wanted to, somehow enter the Great Pyramid. After all, as I mentioned before, of course, the original entrance was not visible. Also quite irregularly shaped is this structure in the underground. The descending passage that is connected to the original entrance leads directly to an underground subterranean chamber. And I believe you should be able to see that it is not finished. It's quite rough and, not as nicely shaped as, for instance, the Queen's Chamber and the King's Chamber that just passed by the center of the wall projection area. And this huge bar-shaped structure, by the way, is the Great Gallery, one of the most impressive structures inside the Great Pyramid. All right then. And these are of course videos, super high resolution videos, but I am controlling the camera, so I can look around with you, you see? And again, I can actually stop. Okay, just a quick stop. Again, just for your orientation. Let's see if I can point it out to you. We have the descending passage, this really long one that leads to the subterranean chamber, and then we have this robbers tunnel that is connected to the ascending passage, and that one leads right to the main attractions. Okay, just a quick reminder, and we will now actually fly through the robbers tunnel, one of my personal favorite bits. It's really quite interesting and visually appealing. Okay. And notice that it's quite roughly cut. The big idea was to get inside and not to build beautiful, smooth walls, I suppose. And right here in front of us, and again, I do hope that you can at least see a little bit of my laser pointer. These two large blocks are blocking the way from the original entrance to the ascending passage. And we can already see part of the ascending passage right before us, right? Okay, so this is already where we can go upstairs. And those blocking stones, those those blocks made out of granite, weren't removed because it was quite a lot of work. So basically, the workmen of Al-Mamun, probably Al-Mamun, just left them where they found them. Okay, so we will now start the next video, which will take us to the King's Chamber. Okay, so as mentioned a second before, this is the ascending passage. And the ascending passage leads directly to the Great Gallery, by the way. So this is one of my favorite moments when we stand before this enormously high gallery. It's up to 8.7 meters tall, so quite amazingly high. And it's about twice as broad as the passage that we just left. And let me just quickly reposition the camera. We will do another just very, very quick stop before we actually enter the King's Chamber. We are now before the King's Chamber, and there is a small hole, and I know it's quite difficult to tell, but somewhere around here, there's a small hole which you can enter and get inside some hidden chambers, which are right above the Great Gallery, the King's Chamber. I just wanted to mention it, because those chambers are very rarely visited by tourists, but I think they are quite interesting because inside those so-called relieving chambers or relief chambers, marks were found, marks from work gangs. And those work gangs had different names. Most of them were a variation of Khufu's name. Pharaoh Khufu was the king, the great leader that this pyramid was built for. And for a long time, there were no direct links to Khufu. Herodot actually mentioned him. He mentioned that Cheops or Khufu, both the same name for the same guy, were actually that it was his pyramid, but he lived more than 2,000 years after King Khufu. So, a lot of room for error. Okay, so here we are inside the king's chamber. Let's just take a look around. And there's some points of interest, I would say. I mean, we can look to the ceiling. There we have enormous, very, very large granite slabs, which form basically the floor of those relief chambers. And yeah, if you heard of that, just Google relief chambers and Great Pyramid, and you should be able to have some really cool images, and also images of those red markings left by the work gangs. Yeah, so those marks, again, they were interesting because they mentioned Khufu's name inside the pyramid. Okay, so why is this the main attraction? Why is this so impressive? I hope it comes across the stream, the video on YouTube, but these walls are perfectly smooth. They are really, really beautifully worked. And that is impressive because according to most Egyptologists, ancient Egyptians didn't even have iron tools to work granite. And if you work with granite today, you wouldn't do it the same way as ancient Egyptians did it. You would actually use some steel and maybe even diamonds to work this very, very hard rock. And maybe experimental archaeologists, have figured out how they did it. There's a theory that they actually used a copper saw, a very large copper saw worked by two men. And then they put some quartz sand on top of the granite block and moved the copper saw back and forth, right? So this way they could actually cut granite. There are videos on the internet which demonstrate this, by the way, so do check them out if you want to see the process. And what's so interesting is that they're actually the same kinds of marks left by this process with the copper saw and the quartz sand as you would find them on the ancient granite stones or blocks. So this is only a theory, and we haven't thus proven it yet, at least, but it's a really, really interesting theory, and it's one possible explanation why or how they could have done it, right? So let me just quickly show you. The only object that was ever found, in modern times in this chamber, it's the sarcophagus of Khufu. All of the beautiful, valuable gifts for the pharaoh were long removed, probably in antiquity even. Oh, and because I get asked about the shafts of the king's and queen's chamber quite a lot, so I hope I can actually show you with my laser pointer. It's the shafts are quite interesting. They were called air shafts for some time, but they're probably not air shafts, but rather ceremonial, maybe. So this is one, and this is the other one, which was enlarged by people looking for riches, probably. So I believe this was now a nice little insight into the Great Pyramid. Clemens will now continue with his part. Oh, sorry, Roland and Clemens.
Yeah, Melinda, thank you very much for the presentation.
My pleasure.
And
bye-bye, guys.
Well, what I just wanted to mention here as well is that, as you saw, the project today is not the normal way how we present content here. So this room is designed for groups of 50, 60, 70 people, which are moving around and standing here in the middle of the projection. And the presenter normally is also like standing in the middle of the crowd and talking to the people. And that's why it's very important to be able to present live in here. This is the reason why we do not have a pre-recorded audio and just play back a video, as you could probably also do. But here, as you saw, Melinda has always the control of the presentation. She can basically control the camera, she can modify the speed, where she knows where she's going next, and she can adapt to the audience. And this is why it's so important here that in spaces like that you have the possibility to interact with the content and that you are not doing only video playback. So just for the feeling of immersion for the audio, for the audience. So there must be this feeling of control of the space. And this is something what we try to provide. And how this is done is something which Clemens will show us today. As I mentioned before, we are using Unity 3D, which is a game engine, to basically realize projects like that. And what's important to know for sure is that we are using here two workstations. So one workstation is rendering the complete wall and the other workstation is rendering the complete floor. So which means they need to be synchronized via network, do network communication, so that you always have basically a corresponding image on both projection planes. And that's why you also need capabilities of a 3D engine to also then control all the interaction and all the playback in situations like this. But I would just like to hand over to Clemens now and ask him basically for a run-through of the Unity project and how this had been done here.
Thank you very much, Roland. Yeah, hello everybody. I will start with some slides, but I'll make it short. This is going to be very technical, so no hard. Just for developers, game designers, whoever, technicians. So basically, what we worked off is a Spin Digital SDK for the player plugin. So Spin Digital in Germany developed the player itself, and they provided a nice little plugin to build this player with any other, to combine this player with any other technology, and we used it to create a native core plugin that we use in several applications, as you can see in the slides. We split up this core plugins in three parts. We have our own Immersify video player that you can just put videos in, like VLC or something like this. We use a Unity 3D player and an Unreal player, Unreal Engine 4 player. And what I'm going to introduce you is the Unity version of this player. But before I start, I want to shortly explain why we do all of this. And the thing is that actually if you think about video playing, there's a lot of stuff outside. If you think about video playing for Unity engine, there's a lot of stuff that is already provided. And if we look at the standard Unity video player, we have a lot of functionality. It's nice. You can plug it in. It's working standalone, and it's just there. But it's quite limited in terms of resolution and the VR support. And then, of course, you can buy a plugin. We took just AV Pro Player as a reference, but there are a lot of players outside. But actually, AV Pro is a nice player. And it has a limitation of 8K video playing, and of course the comparison between our Immersify player and AV Pro in this table is not quite fair, because AV Pro has a lot of features and it's an awesome player. We concentrate only on the VR and high resolution parts, and therefore what we wanted to achieve is a playback of 16K video material, and therefore, we implemented all that stuff in Unity. So, and the end result, what you can do is actually what you just saw right now in the presentation with Melinda. As an example, an interactive, high resolution, 360 degrees, stereo, video, you name it. It's actually a technical demonstration, but it's exactly what we did. All right, that said, I just want to show you briefly that you can already download the Deep Space Development Kit. So if you want to do something for the Deep Space here in Linz, with Unity 3D, you can already download the dev kit on GitHub, as you see here. All the sources available, it's documented. I hope it's nicely documented. And yeah, if you want to do this, you can start right away. We actually also plan to publish the player software that I show you now. It's not like not already online, but we work on that. And that said, I just want to jump into Unity and just very briefly show you what we did there. Maybe just for those who are not so familiar with Unity, we have this hierarchy view on the left side. We have a scene view and a game view for preview. And on the right side, we have an inspector that gives us details for the stuff we're just looking at. And they start on the right top at the heart of this whole implementation, which is the video cube or the video player, which is attached not only to a cube. Actually, this is quite an interesting fact. If you think about 360 degree, you might think about working with a sphere, because 360 degree, looking around, it would be logically to do it on a sphere, but we decided to use a cube for better UVs, and therefore what we have is a cube where we map a 360 degree video. And if you're in the center of the cube, I will just simulate this here in this view here, and look around. I mean, this is just demo material, but you will see that there are hardly, or that it looks quite spherical or 360 degree style without any edges. You cannot see the borders of the cube anymore. All right, just that to mention. So we have this cube. It's actually this mesh here. You can see it in this inspector now. And we have this Immersify player plugin, which is basically the heart of the implementation. It works together with a lot of other scripts, but this is what you will use most as a user. And we'll just briefly explain it. You can add a file name here. You can put it, we support currently HEVC and MP4 with a special decoded with a spin digital encoder, and you can put an absolute path or put it to streaming assets and reference it there. You can define a frame rate, but if you use an MP4, the frame rate is already provided by the container. You can define if you want to loop the video, if it shall pause at start, which makes sense for some applications. And here we have some stereo settings, because your video might be mono, which means 2D. It might be left-right stereo, which is more or less very, very common. Or it might be top-bottom, and this is quite recommended by us, because you have to think we are talking about 16K videos, and if you think side by side, we have double width videos with side by side. So if you have a 16K video, it would actually be the width of 32K, but it's better technically to use the top-bottom video in this case, because then we have something like a more quadratic rect for the video. All right, we can invert the left-right or top-bottom style. So no matter how you converted the video, if the left side is for the left eye or if the left side is for the right eye, we can do this here in the player. We can make it upside down, which is sometimes important for some videos. We can add an extra audio file that is playback in the engine. So there will be two options in the future, which is playing back the video audio itself, but you might want to mix this with an extra audio file. And this is because, especially for the Great Pyramid application that you saw right now, we had two audio sources. One is when you play the video, and another sound loop comes in if you pause the video, and that's where we have this source background loop. So it gives you a little bit more flexibility, and it's actually part of the Immersify project itself, because we want to have the illusion for a viewer that it's not actually a video that you see, that it's mixed with interactive content, with real-time rendered content, and with tricks like this, with having two different audio systems, having audio while the video is paused is part of this illusion. There are some technical settings for number of threads and buffer size and queue. Basically, if we put it to -1, it lets the plugin decide, but if we go open source with this, it will be well defined. And actually, this is it, what I want to say, because the rest goes deeper and deeper into the rabbit hole for technical stuff. Another part that is interesting is the Immersify mesh video, because it controls where the video is playback. So in this part, in this scene, I just see that, is the handy still online? I'm not sure. In this part, what we see is that the cube is combined with the video, and we can actually define any mesh to put this video on. So we can put it on the plane or on a whatever you name it mesh. And the last part here is the audio system, which is actually just the built-in Unity audio source. Yeah, right. I go on with the camera controller. As you saw, we have a 360-degree camera, and we want to, of course, control it. So there's an extra script that helps you to control the camera rotation, and yeah, that you can look around in the video. And we have, of course, the camera, and as it is stereo, we split the camera in left eye camera and right eye camera. And they have an UV controller, both of them have a UV controller attached script that basically controls the UVs of the video. And the thing is, it is specially made for stereo videos, because you have to imagine if you have a stereo video, let's talk about top-bottom video. You have a video on the top and you have a video on the bottom. It's twice the video, one's rendered for the left eye, the other one's rendered for the right eye. And what we do is we have to decode the whole video. And to show it in stereo, we listen to the driver, and when the driver says, the video driver says he wants to render the left eye, we provide the left eye part of the top-bottom video, which will be the top part of the video in this case. And what we do is we shift the UVs so that you see the top part of the video, or for the right eye, we shift the UVs again to show the bottom part of the video. So, what else do we have? Yeah, and last but not least, this is not part of the Great Pyramid application in this case, but to provide some flexibility and to have something similar like a normal video player, like our core player or the VLC, for example. We also have some kind of configuration, so which is nothing else than start parameters. And so we can, all the parameters that I showed you on the Immersify plugin, you can set them here, or most of them, and provide them via start command line arguments, basically. And then you can use this whole thing as a 360-degree video with all the functionality, but you do not have to hard code any paths. And that's basically it. If I just press play here and cross fingers that everything works, then we should see a familiar video in a few seconds. Actually, this is all displayed on my laptop. You have to compare what you see in deep space. It's some master machines from 2015, and what we have here is my laptop. I do not show you the content in and my controller does not work. Oh, yeah, it does. We do not show you the content here in 12K as we do in the deep space, but it's just a full HD just for me to work with this developer version of the video, so to say. And as you can see, it's quite flexible. It's all in my engine. I have a preview of everything I do, and if I mix this with other content, with real-time content, then I have a perfectly nice preview of what I'm doing, what I'm working in, which is one of the advantages of working with Unity Engine or Unreal. Yes, what else to say? I do not want to go into code as it's already pretty late, and just hand back over to Roland for some final words, I suggest.
Yeah, Clemens, thank you very much for this very quick run through the project. So what is important to understand is that you basically can render any real-time content now here as well on top. This is actually something that you do. This we have not seen this in the presentation before, because there is also like something like a minimap which helps you for orientation, which is a 3D object in this space, in this video space. So you can basically combine this with all kinds of real-time graphics as well. And this opens up a lot of possibilities. So this was for us our also a first integration test project, if you want, like something like that, to really get the tech together and make it work. And for sure, this is very interesting then to extend this from here and to think of other applications and content and take this even further. So, and the reason why we publish this also on GitHub is because we really want to invite people to take these tools and to think about what you can do with this. And we think that there is really a lot of future for immersive environments like this to really extend the possibilities even further, think of new forms of interaction also that you can allow in spaces like that. And therefore, it's good to have some kind of a core component to play back certain types of media. And this is actually what we wanted to provide with this plugin. Okay, so, but I would say that this was basically it for this part of the demonstration. And the next thing that we will be looking at 1 o'clock is a preview of the translucent St. Stephen's Cathedral, which is a completely new project. We will see Clemens again, and I think Melinda as well. And additionally, Johannes will join us, a colleague of us who mostly focused on all the design aspects for this project. So let's have a look at this in a few minutes. Thank you for your attention so far.